Welcome to the National Pulse. I'm Raheem, editor-in-chief of thenationalpulse.com. And in my country, it's Remembrance Day. Here, it's Veterans Day. I want to take a moment at the beginning of the show. I know we've got a lot to talk about as we still watch the election results unfurl before our eyes. The race getting tighter, not wider, as far as Joe Biden is concerned. And as I said yesterday, and I'll say again, Joe Biden is not the president-elect of the United States. And there is not an office of the president-elect. That is a totally made-up thing by a totally made-up president-elect. It was actually Obama who first invented the idea of the office of the president-elect, I believe, or at least put all the bells and whistles behind it. It's a nonsense. And it wouldn't even matter that it was a nonsense if Joe Biden had actually won this election. But with everything we know at this point in time, Joe Biden hasn't won this election. Oh, CNN is fantasizing 24/7 about him winning the election. MSNBC, the front page of the New York Times today. But Joe Biden has not won this election. Now, I was thinking about a moment 4 years ago when I had just stepped off a train from New York to Washington, D.C., and I was called by Sky News in Britain, one of the worst fake news outlets in the world. But Sky likes to pretend, like its sister network Fox, that it's on the political right. It's not. Anyway, I was asked to go up to the rooftop and talk to Sky News because I just met with who was the actual president-elect back then. Remember, Hillary Clinton conceded because she lost. That made Donald Trump the president-elect. And I wanted to play you something because Remembrance Day is about being solemn and remembering the sacrifices of people. You know, I wear a poppy. We wear poppies in the United Kingdom. I know they do in Canada as well. I do see some people over here doing that to represent the memory of the people who gave their lives for us and who continue to do so. But the poppy has increasingly become politicized in the United Kingdom, and one side uses it against the other to say you're not patriotic if you don't wear it, and the other side says, oh, how dare you, tell us what to do, we shouldn't have to honor the troops if we don't want to, and it's just become a whole silly thing. I think it's a decent thing to wear it. I'm not going to hector people for not. And I'm especially not going to hector people who are in a different country and can't buy a poppy. You know, these are for sale, or a variant of these are for sale at every train station, tube station, outside, everywhere in the United Kingdom on the run-up to the 11th day of the 11th month. But for Sky News, well, why don't we just roll the tape and let you see how Sky News treated me 4 years ago. Let's run it.
Can I ask you, first of all, when you and the others met Donald Trump, why weren't you wearing a poppy?
Very hard to find a poppy in New York City, actually. I had one that I had from England in my other coat, but we got some new coats for the trip, and I forgot to move it over, so that was all that was.
Well, I was in New York City all last week covering the elections, and guess what? I had a poppy. Everyone I was with had a poppy. The Americans had poppies, and you couldn't find one.
Yeah. No, I had one on my other coat, and in fact, I was wearing it just before we went up. I was stopped on the street by a couple of Canadians who recognized my poppy and said, thanks for wearing that, and they were wearing theirs as well. So, believe me, there was no attempt to be not wearing poppies.
No, well, it's the act of wearing them. They said, well, Aaron Banks managed to get his hands on one.
Brought one over because he flew over the day before from England. Of course, I've been over here now for a long time, and my poppy got a bit tatty, and so I thought it probably wasn't best to be wearing it in a picture. But it's funny enough you bring that up. I didn't realise you were going to ask that. Today I made a donation of £300 to the Royal British Legion. So I think it's not just about poppies. It's about making sure that these charities are helped financially as well.
But it is about the actual display, is it not? To show the poppy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where you're going with this. I've told you I had a poppy on my other coat. It seems a bit silly.
Well, you know, you can tell that to the British Legion, can't you? Nigel Farage, also not wearing one, 2 years ago, was saying how he was very, very miffed about not being allowed to appear at the cenotaph.
Yeah, I don't know what the question is, Dermot.
Well, the question is the disrespect. I mean, would you like to apologise for it? I mean, it doesn't really sound to me as if you forgot it is a good enough excuse.
Well, like I say, I donated £300 to the Royal British Legion today, well before I knew you were going to ask these gotcha questions. Your producer, Build Me, is coming on to talk about the meeting with Donald Trump. And quite frankly, I've been wearing a poppy for weeks now, and I've been over here in the United States. I had a poppy on my coat. You know, this is silly politics, Dermot. Can we talk about the issues?
We certainly can, but, you know, there are colleagues of mine who appear on the news, who decide not to wear a poppy and make such donations as your own and get dumped upon by members of your party and by others.
Well, why do they choose not to wear them? I didn't choose not to wear one. Why do they choose not to wear one?
OK, well, we are going around in circles, but they forgot to wear them.
Well, now you don't want to talk about it.
Okay, so he tried. Look, you saw me getting wound up at the end there, but he says my colleagues choose not to wear them, and we get attacked for not doing so. I said, well, why would you choose not to wear one? It wasn't a choice for me not to wear one. Couldn't get a hold of one. It's 2 days after the US election. We're running around New York. We're trying to meet with the president-elect. I'm not going to the BBC studios in New York to find I hope that a poppy seller might be in there somewhere. But it's telling, isn't it? They will use service to attack our side. Remember the Atlantic article about Donald Trump? They'll use that to attack our side. Meanwhile, he just gave it away. My colleagues choose not to wear one. All right. I just thought I'd remind you of that. It was a bit of fun. We'll come back after this break, deal with, as I said there, the issues. We'll be right back. Well, here at Real America's Voice, we want to take a moment to thank the people who have served on from our staff here. So when it comes to honouring those who served, we're most proud of the veterans that we have here at the network, Real America's Voice and Just the News, our sister network, Weather Nation. We understand and honour the sacrifice that all veterans have made for these countries. But we want to say an extra special thank you to the ones here in the Real America's Voice family. So thank you for your hard work. Thank you for being the first to step up when your country needed you. And thank you for everything that you bring to Real America's Voice, Just the News, Weather Nation, and beyond. We couldn't do what we do here without your help. So on behalf of us here at News, thank you. Your courage is inspiring, and we hope we're making you proud. I want to answer some questions that we received in the live chat. We have a National Pulse live chat. The question I get a lot is, what's the significance of the poppy? And I realised, I said we'd get into the issues. We've got a lot to talk about in terms of the legal votes, Dominion voting, etc. Stick around. We're still chasing those stories. But I just wanted to, for the audience that doesn't know, you know, the poppy, and I'm going to read here from the Imperial War Museum website. I think it has one of the best explanations of this. I could just tell you, look, the poppies grew in the fields where people fought, but I think it's even better to read some of the more detail behind this. So the poppy is the enduring symbol as a remembrance of the wars that our servicemen and women have fought in. It's strongly linked with Armistice Day. We know it as Armistice Day or Remembrance Day. You have it as Veterans Day here in the United States. You also have a separate day as well, I understand, Memorial Day. And the poppy's origin lays with the First World War. They were a common sight on the Western Front in the battlefields. They flourished in the soil that was churned up by the fighting and the shelling. And the flower provided Canadian doctor John McCrae with inspiration for the poem In Flanders Fields, which I'm sure a lot of you know. He wrote that while serving in Ypres in 1915. It was published in Punch magazine, actually, having previously been rejected by the Spectator magazine. And in 1918, in response to McRae's poem. An American, Moyna Michael, wrote, "And now the torch and poppy red we wear in honor of our dead." It was actually that American who campaigned to make the poppy a symbol of national remembrance for those who had died in the war. And artificial poppies were first sold in Britain in 1921 to raise money for the Earl Haig Fund in support of ex-servicemen and the families of those who had died in the conflict. They were supplied by Anna Guerin, who had been manufacturing the flowers in France to raise money for war orphans. Selling poppies proved so popular that in 1922, the British Legion founded a factory staffed by disabled ex-servicemen to produce its own. And they continue to do that today. Other charities sell poppies in different colours, each with their own meaning. White poppies, for example, symbolize peace without violence, and purple poppies are worn to honor animals killed in conflict. The poppy continues to be sold worldwide to raise money and to remember those who lost their lives in the First World War and subsequent conflicts. That's from the Imperial War Museum's website, a really wonderful museum there in South London, which I've been to a number of times, especially as a child. I did want to add something to that. This isn't from the Imperial War Museum, by the way, but the white poppy is actually often used by the political left to symbolize their objection to what they call colonialism. And the white poppy actually was used by a lot of communists several decades ago. I think probably still is to this day in a lesser sense. So if you see a poppy for sale and it's white, just know that there are unfortunately some political connotations to that. I choose the red one. We read the red one in the United Kingdom, and I think we should bring it back over here, Natalie. You know, I wear pocket squares a lot, and I've started to notice that a lot of people in DC now like to wear the pocket squares. You know, they wear the puff like me. They used to do the line, but I do the puff, and now I'm seeing a lot of puffs everywhere, right? You see a lot of puffs in DC anyway. But the other one is the silk scarves. Remember, I brought the silk scarf back, and that will be reintroduced into the... What are you laughing at? I brought the silk scarf back. Everybody knows it.
Taking a lot of credit.
Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. So why don't we add to that and bring the poppy back to the United States? It was started by an American, who Moyna Michael, who actually started selling the first poppies as a symbol of remembrance. So what does Natalie Winters think?
There's probably some spaces available in Union Station. You could buy a place, you could start selling them. I don't know how much money you'd make, but...
Well, it's not about the money. You donate the money to charity. Have you been listening? She
I
hasn't.
was working on an article.
She hasn't, but she's working on an article. All right. We're going to move on to the subjects of the day, which are the legal votes. Now, you may have heard the Trump campaign has filed another lawsuit in Michigan in addition to their lawsuit in Pennsylvania. We're seeing more around the country as well. Hundreds of affidavits, hundreds of complaints, so many examples that we're seeing from all around the country, whether they're anecdotal bits of information, whether they are signed affidavits, whether they're videos, whether they're pictures, still images that you're seeing, whether it's ballots themselves. We're seeing a lot of reasons to not count Joe Biden as the president-elect, and so we're not on this show, and I know only a few other networks are treating this race like it's supposed to be treated, and that is to say, it ain't over. Now, obviously, the keen-eyed amongst you will be aware that I've been working with teams of statisticians and people with great experience in data. We had Wilson Powell on the War Room show this morning, who I've been working with. He was walking us through some of the reasons why he doesn't believe the numbers are legitimate as they came out on election night. You've all seen the fraud graph. It just happens to tick up, straight up in the air, and then just over the top for Joe Biden, and then just carries along 1% over President Trump the entire time. And it's not just not believable, it's manifestly fraudulent. The idea, the concept is manifestly fraudulent. The gaslighting by the media is manifestly fraudulent. The idea that we shouldn't hear out these legal challenges is manifestly evident that it's manifestly fraudulent, right? And this is all that you need to know right now in terms of the way that they're treating us. And there are so many people out there crunching the data, working on so much of this stuff. And we're going to bring you more information. When we come back, there's a new website. Count the Legal Votes. Now, I don't know who's in charge of that website. I don't know who's running that website, but they're doing a magnificent job as far as I'm concerned. Every legal vote right? Every Legal Vote. And when we come back, we're going to show you some of the graphics from that website and what the race would look like in 3 different scenarios. So stick around here at the National Pulse. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the National Pulse. I want to jump right into Every Legal Vote, everylegalvote.com. Now, again, I don't know who's behind this site. I'm sure somebody will let me know. It just popped up to me in the last couple of hours, and it's a job very well done. In fact, can we throw to my computer here? I don't know if that's still a possibility for the production team. If we can, let's do that. I think we're frozen again on there. All right, we'll have to restart that connection. In the meantime, okay, let's pull up the images. No, let's not look at MacBooks on my computer screen, which is what I was shopping for before we went live. Let's throw the graphics up from Every Legal Vote. It's a good thing I was only looking at MacBooks. Every Legal Vote. So here's the scenario, as you see on the Every Legal Vote website, and I commend this to you to go there yourself. It's a great place where you can actually report fraud yourself. There's a big button at the top right of the website. So here you see the map where it shows what the situation looks like with voter fraud. Okay, so this is 304. This would result in 304 votes, electoral college votes for Joe Biden, and 234 for Donald Trump. Now, let's go to the next image here and show people what we're looking at in the next column, which is the current status given. Okay, I think we've got the without voter fraud one. Let's stick with that. Let's stick with the without voter fraud one. So without voter fraud, you can see here for yourselves that this leaves Joe Biden with 231 electoral college votes and Donald Trump with 307, a scenario that I think a lot of people expected, and I would say rightly expected, to play out at the last election. And then we look back at the current status. Now, the current status really puts this, the orange ones into flux, so we're not counting those here, and that shows Joe Biden at 212 and Donald Trump at 234. Now, the orange represents, as you can see there on your screen, places where fraud has been detected. So you can then click in on the website, on this Every Legal Vote website. You can click in and go to Nevada as a state in and of itself, and then break that one down too. So with voter fraud, current status, without voter fraud, and it will break down the results from the state for you at a county level as well. I think this is probably the best example. We can lose the graphics. I think this is probably the best example of how to go through the crazy gaslighting, fantastical situation that we're in right now, which is when you turn on the TVs, which I'm sure very few of you now do in terms of watching mainstream media broadcasts, but when you turn on the TVs, if you're in your local store and looking at the front pages of the newspapers, which again, I'm pretty sure that most of you are not purchasing, you look on social media, you look at the interventions by Twitter, by Facebook, by Instagram, by the whole lot, all of them will tell you, hey, race is over. Office of the president-elect. I'm the president-elect now. Apparently that's how easy it is. I'm the president-elect now. Thank you. Can we change the chyron? I want it to say Raheem Kassam, president-elect of the United States of America. Raheem Kassam, president-elect of the United States of America. Because that's what Joe Biden's done, and that's what the media keeps telling us is the case. But if you go into the detail, like they've done at everylegalvote.com, you can't count the places where you've got fraud detected, so obviously detected, so clear in images, so clear in videos. In Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Nevada, in Arizona, and they told us that they were going to do this. Remember, the Transition Integrity Project was out there in advance. They told us what was going to happen. We know from Dominion voting systems, we're going to get into more details on Dominion voting systems in just a moment that Natalie Winters has been doing reporting on. We know from how Dominion voting systems was rated by the state of Texas that this is not fit for purpose. And okay, let's address the elephant in the room. We should have known. We should have been ready. We should have been prepared. The Trump campaign should have been prepared. But Brad Pascal needed a Ferrari. Okay, I get that. Brad Pascal wanted a Ferrari. There's a great article, by the way, on the National Pulse right now by Rob Wassinger, a friend of mine who worked on the 2016 campaign. If you go through it, he actually gives you, hey, look, Pascal, data guy, didn't really know what he was doing running a campaign. We all saw that in Tulsa. We all saw the disaster that was Tulsa, how he got hijacked by TikTok people. And again, that was another tell, wasn't it? They were willing to defraud the American public out of tickets to a Tulsa rally. You think they're not willing to defraud you out of your vote? Of course they are. That was a trial run. Hey, let's see how much we can play around with this. And they played around with it to the tune of 1 million people registering for the Tulsa rally, which left the Trump campaign, well, looking rather silly. And then Bill Stepien comes in and starts cleaning up, as campaign manager, starts cleaning up some of the problems that we saw within the campaign, does a good job of it as well. But at that point, it's too late. At that point, you don't have the in-house expertise. At that point, you don't have the fight back ready for what was obviously going to happen on Election Day, which is fraud. Why else would you push for mass mail-in ballots like that? Especially if you're going to say to people, hey, your mail-in ballot didn't work, you didn't put it in the security blanket, whatever you're supposed to do in the envelope. You got to come in and cast your provisional vote in person. Hold on, I thought we weren't casting votes in person because it was too dangerous, because somebody might cough on you. But no, it's okay because your mail-in ballot wasn't right, so now you can come in person and do it in person. Evidence, if you ever needed it, of the rationale they play out to people, and people just believe it. You know, there are serious, logical, respectable, intelligent people who believe this ruse, who are actually sitting there thinking to themselves, Joe Biden, president-elect, and he didn't do any cheating, because the New York Times tells me there wasn't any cheating. Look, I want everybody to go to this website, everylegalvote.com, have a look around. Look at the primer they have on fraud, look at the stories, go through their resource bank. They've got recent stories on the site as well, actually a much better live blog than Natalie's been running. And then there's that report fraud button. So if you have seen anything, it is incumbent upon you to do your duty. Look, the campaign didn't do it. Brad Pascal didn't do it. No offense, Brad Pascal. I met him twice. Who cares at this point? Now it's on us. Now it's on you. You can't just be an observer. Don't just be a viewer of this show. If you're just a viewer, I don't want you here. Be an active participant. There's a break coming up. Do something in it. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the National Pulse. Ask yourself this question. Why did Joe Biden's surge only happen in very specific counties, in very specific times of night? He didn't surge anywhere else. He didn't surge in counties, in counties, in states that A, Democrats didn't have a real thumb on, their people, and B, that he didn't desperately have to. Remember, President Trump won, I think it was 186 out of 200 bellwether counties in the country. I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here about how ludicrous all of this is, but I think what we need in our arsenal, especially when we're talking to our friends, our family members, our neighbors, our bartenders, our servers, you get into these conversations, our taxi drivers, you get into these conversations, or at least I do. Maybe people just see it in me on a day-to-day basis, and people go, well, what's your evidence? You can point them to video evidence, you can point them to statistical evidence. You also got to point them to this sort of, I guess you would call it circumstantial, but rhetorical evidence. Asking people, what we're being asked to is believe that something isn't a fraud when it's in our face and it's spelled F-A-F-R-A-U-D. Help if I could spell. Sometimes they leave things up on the screen in front of me, letters, and it puts me off. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. All right, I want to bring Natalie Winters in here to talk about this Dominion voting stuff because, again, the case, we're building this case bit by bit, okay? And that's always how it was going to be. Without a centralized, pre-ready effort by Brad Parscale's campaign, because that's when it would have had to have been put together in order to deploy this. The Democrats knew about this. By the way, when did the Transition Integrity Project first convene?
It was in 2019,
Yeah.
the end of 2019.
Yeah.
December.
So then that means how long before that were they planning?
Well, actually, if you remember, we went through who was funding the group, and it was part of that broader network, which you could even link to the Lincoln Project. Defend Democracy is really the big group, and also a bunch of Obama administration alumni, legal experts, individuals who worked in the administration. They'd been planning since day one, if not prior to the Trump presidency, prior to Inauguration Day. I remember we'd gone through a host of tweets from individuals who were affiliated with the Transition Integrity Project or linked to PR firms that they had hired, and even before, I believe on November 4th, some of these individuals were tweeting anything to get Trump out of office. We don't care. He will not become president. He will certainly not get reelected. So much like impeachment, it's been since the onset of November 3rd, I guess, 2016.
The reason I'm asking that and the reason the audience needs to know that is because a lot of people, me included, we're frustrated about, well, why wasn't the campaign prepped for this? Well, the campaign would have had to prep, effectively what we're saying is at least 18 months ago. But realistically, 2 years ago. Were there any signs that this was going to take place 2 years ago? Not really. So what we have to look at is at the end of last year, towards the beginning of this year, and then the Biden camp got a huge, massive gift, right, from the Chinese Communist Party called the coronavirus. And that gave them the excuse to go out and say everybody has to mail-in vote. You can't go to the polling stations anymore, even though...
Yes, so interestingly enough, the Sunday before Election Day, the CDC put out a statement, a huge information dump about voting, if you have coronavirus, if you don't. So remember, really underscoring the Democrats' whole case as to why we needed effectively universal mail-in voting was that if you showed up to the polls, you would contract coronavirus and you would die. Nevertheless, CDC, as I said, about 2 days before the election, waits until then to put up this. Quote, voters have the right to vote regardless of whether they are sick or in quarantine. Voters who are sick or in quarantine should take steps to protect poll workers and other voters. This includes wearing a mask, staying at least 6 feet away from others, and washing your hands or using hand sanitizer before and after voting. You should also let poll workers know that you are sick or in quarantine when you arrive at the polling location. Check with local authorities for any additional guidance. So effectively what the CDC is saying is even if you have coronavirus, you could have voted in person. You just needed to take the necessary precautions, the necessary measures that everyone is doing if you're in public, right? You're forced to wear a mask, forced to stay 6 feet away from people. So this certainly is interesting, and I would say undermines entirely the months-long push that we saw coming from the Democratic side of the ticket and even some moderate establishment Republicans insisting that without mail-in voting, American democracy is dead.
I would have. Honestly, I would, if I were President Trump, say this election doesn't count, actually. Even if he wins, he should come off and say, even if he wins, it doesn't count. Because what we've heard from the CDC here is the entire rationale behind mail-in voting actually didn't mean anything at all in the end.
And if you remember, it was the National Pulse account tweeting out this story that actually got the account banned and later the Facebook account banned because it really completely destroys this, as I said, months if not years-long case that universal mail-in balloting was a panacea to the pandemic and would allow everyone to vote. And it's certainly curious the timing of the CDC to have waited literally the Sunday before.
Let's just redo it. Let's redo it. Only in-person votes. We can have an election in March of next year. And they can say, hey, you said people didn't need to mail-in vote. There's all this fraud around mail-in voting. Tell you what, in order to bring the country together, to stop this, because look, 70 million Trump voters are not going to accept Joe Biden as president if this result is carried through. Because guess what? There was so much fraud out there, so much demonstrable fraud out there. So just I realize it's probably unprecedented. Have another election.
so much fraud, from the voting system used to the officials adjudicating these elections, both on the local level, right, poll watchers themselves, people boarding up windows, to even county executives, the chairman of your local Pennsylvania County Election Board. Well, it turns out that Joe Biden attended his victory party in 2019. This individual has bragged.
We'll get into that. Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
I want to recap on Dominion voting system, because we talked about Dominion voting system yesterday, but we've got so many more people joining this show every day. In 30 seconds, tell us what you told us yesterday about Dominion, and then after the break, we'll get into the new information.
Sure. So Dominion voting system, which is used in around 20 states, it notoriously switched votes for Trump to Biden in a county in Michigan, actually making the whole entire county go for Biden instead of Trump. But this firm has extensive links, whether it's to the Clinton Foundation, but interestingly enough, the Texas Secretary of State flagged this system in both 2013 and 2019 and said that no state should be using this. It's, quote, fragile and error prone. There were issues with prompting incorrect candidates, telling individuals that they had voted when they actually hadn't. So whether it was technical glitches or highly politicized in terms of the people who are involved with it, it definitely should not have been used wide scale.
When we come back, we'll talk to you more about Dominion and who its lobbyist friends are. We'll be back with more National Pulse after this break. So Georgia is going to perform a hand recount of presidential election ballots. Joe Biden, as of today, we're told, has a lead of around 14,000 votes in the state. And we'll see what shakes out as the recount occurs. We'll bring you all of the news here on Real America's Voice. You can download the app Real America's Voice, or I think you can search America's Voice. Actually, it comes up much higher up the list. I want to turn back to Natalie Winters now. Natalie, let's talk about Dominion. So Dominion is this voting system, I think, what is it, Canadian?
So its U.S. headquarters are in Denver, but it was founded in Toronto, so its international headquarters are in Canada.
Okay. And they're used in about 20 states across the U.S. for the last several elections have been used.
And an election in the Philippines.
And an election in the Philippines, in good company there. And then we know that Texas said this should not be certified as a system that we want to use, but it is a system that's been used around the country, and we've seen the system fail.
Do basically exactly what the Texas Secretary of State predicted it would, whether it was in that Michigan county, which, as I said, flipped the entire county to go for Biden instead of Trump. But even in Georgia, there were a lot of, as Politico described it, quote, technical glitches, which is certainly a convenient way, probably a euphemism, to describe what truly happened when you dig down into the individuals surrounding Dominion voting systems, specifically individuals on their lobbying team. Not only do you have Nancy Pelosi's former chief of staff running the account at a huge DC-based law firm, but you also have an individual who ran the 2012 Obama campaign, their vote protection effort. He was responsible for helping turn out and select poll watchers. So it's certainly convenient. Again, it's not that we're alleging necessarily any criminal conduct, but when you start to piece things together and you see individuals who have extensive links to Joe Biden on county election boards and the type of systems that they're choosing to use also have extensive links to the Democratic Party and huge Democratic politicians, it starts to get a little curious.
It's more than a little. I mean, I realize you're being, euphemistic about it, but it's more than a little curious, and I think we need to be more literal about this. The Dominion voting systems guy, according to your reporting, which is up on the National Pulse, was an Obama vote protection director, right? So that means that you have a direct partisan link between this company and the political left.
And this is the team that was ostensibly tasked with getting this voting system distributed, getting it used. And I dug into the guy more, looking at his background, and he was a former pretty high-level staffer for a Democratic senator, I believe, who She passed on being nominated or being selected as Joe Biden's vice presidential pick, but it was alleged that Joe Biden had been sending feelers out to her, potentially saying, "Would you like to be my vice presidential candidate?" So there's extensive links, and I think it just goes back to, frankly, the double standard. If it was the other side of the aisle, if you saw someone who in 2016 was turning out the vote for President Trump, you would never hear the end of it had they selected a voting system with ties, even 1/10% that Dominion has, to the left.
Yeah, I totally agree. Which is why I just keep coming back to, hey, this whole thing, at least in some of these states, needs to be rerun. Not just recounted, but rerun. Because, look, let me be, I mean, some people might think I'm being rude here, but I'm not. I mean this in just the most obvious sense. What kind of voters are going to be more likely to struggle if a machine is telling them that something's off, or if a machine is glitching in front of them, or a button is in the wrong place, or a ticket gets spat out at the wrong time? It's older voters, right? And I don't mean that pejoratively. It just that's the case. It's like I can't use some of the new technologies out there, right? As you know, but older voters will struggle with even sort of an ATM style voting machine if that thing is like spitting up stupid things in front of them. And we know from what Texas experienced with Dominion voting systems that, a little bit of thing would flash up on the screen, but not for long enough for the user to know what the machine was saying. It was spitting out tickets when it shouldn't have been. That will confuse people. And who are older voters more likely to vote for?
Donald Trump.
It's Donald Trump. So I don't know that a recount fixes that problem.
I agree, and I also have the same concerns over who's conducting the recount. It's not that we can certify that Republicans will be able to watch these actual ballots getting counted. As we know, history proves they weren't allowed even when they had court orders. We saw sheriffs who also had pictures with Joe Biden on their personal Facebook pages later deleting it once it turned out that they were blocking Republican poll watchers.
But just remind people of that, because that we threw that out, it feels like 3 months ago. It was about, 5-6 days ago now.
Probably less than a week ago.
Right, but just remind us what that was.
Yes, so Rochelle Bilal, who is the sheriff in Philadelphia, she had a picture of her and Joe Biden on her Facebook page from 2019, or at least it's captioned, "Me and Vice President Joe Biden," so it's a logical assumption to think that it contains a picture of her and Joe Biden. But interestingly enough, if you go to her Facebook page now, the picture itself has been either, quote, deleted or kind of security settings changed, so only certain people, ostensibly her friends, could see it. So when you talk about a cover-up, that's a telltale sign of a cover-up.
And why do we care about the sheriff of Philadelphia?
So the Trump campaign had secured a legal victory, allowing Republican poll watchers in. For individuals to remember, there was a pretty jarring video you saw of huge boards going up in front of vote count areas. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, despite this legal ruling in favor of the Trump campaign, in favor of Republican poll watchers, the sheriff refused to enforce the ruling, effectively keeping Republican poll watchers further, even in some cases further away than they had before.
Sorry, they gave them
binoculars.
Binoculars, so that fixes everything. Natalie, I know you haven't been on the planet that long, but or seen 2 or 3 fewer election cycles than I have. How do you view this? I mean, I call this a banana republic type of election, but I don't know if that actually means anything to your generation. But how do you view this, and do your friends and colleagues of your age, do they look at this and go, "Come on, Natalie, fair's fair, you're just being a partisan"?
Unfortunately, yes. At least in my college classes and in situations like that, all the way down from my professors to my peers, the
Crazy.
vote fraud messaging is not cutting through, frankly, because all these individuals are watching is CNN and MSNBC, and they've done a very good job of conditioning these people into so forcefully saying Joe Biden is the president-elect that they've undermined essentially any shred that there could be an ounce of voter fraud.
Do we have my new Chiron, by the way? I need it to say Raheem Kassam, President-elect of the United States. We'll be right back. I'll get it in the break. We'll be right back. I am the president-elect of the United States, and nobody can tell me otherwise, whether or not they change the chyron here at America's Voice or not. I am the president-elect of the United States. Why? Because I say so. Just like Joe Biden is saying so himself, just like Jake Tapper is saying so for himself. And if they can do it, we can do it. I am the president-elect of the United States. So thank you. Thank you for this great honor. I want to turn back to Natalie Winters now. Natalie, we've got so much going on over at the website. I want to talk about briefly the Marine Le Pen story, but first, why don't you talk to us a little bit about Allegheny County?
Sure. So Rich Fitzgerald, who is the top-level executive in this Pennsylvania county, critical county for President Trump to secure the state. Again, this individual chairs the county's election board. So for all we know, he's the one that helped choose Dominion voting systems.
Could have done.
Potentially, he has a lot of power. He's, as I said, the chair. If you look at the monthly meetings that they hold at this county election board, he's always starting the meetings. He's listed as the chairman. And interestingly enough, just a brief swipe of his social media not only shows that he's a huge fan of Joe Biden, which is to be expected. He is a Democrat. He ran for the position as a Democrat, but there's more than meets the eye there. Specifically in 2019, when he was elected for his third term as county executive, Joe Biden actually introduced him at his victory night party, meaning he attended his election night party, which is insane. On the article, which will be up shortly, you can see videos of him there taking pictures with people, calling, his name is Rich Fitzgerald, a hell of a man. You even see a bunch of Facebook posts on Rich's social media accounts, and Facebook, Twitter, you name it. Obviously, he's not banned. Probably never will be, but he even offers, quote, "We know Joe Biden can win here and we're ready to help him." Doesn't specify how, but he's offering his support to Joe Biden. He endorsed Joe Biden in early March, which was comparatively really early to a lot of people who came to support the Biden ticket. But this man really is a huge fan of Joe Biden. He has 6 tweet-long threads extolling him, talking about how much he's done for Scranton and for Pennsylvania, which most people know he hasn't really done anything. He's not really even from there. But nevertheless, this individual, ostensibly, nonpartisan, as I'm sure CNN would tell us, this is who's deciding how elections go down in Allegheny County. Meanwhile, Joe Biden is speaking at his victory party.
It's absolutely unbelievable, or rather totally believable.
Yeah.
And it's not even just that the media, the establishment media will not report all the fraud that's taking place. You can go to that website. I want to give it to you guys again as well. everylegalvote.com. You can go there, and down the right sidebar, it tells you, it goes through lots of different dual registered voters in North Carolina and Florida, MIT analysis of fraudulent vote, all of that stuff. It's incredibly well put together. And then you can go through and click through and look at the fraud stories themselves. Now, look, again, I'll say it again because, somewhere down the line, somebody go, oh, this website's run by this person, and are you endorsing that person? I don't know who runs the website. All I know is the website appears to be an incredibly well put together, comprehensive look on the fraud that we're seeing across the United States so far. So that's all I'm looking at. And if you go through all of this stuff right now, not only is the media not reporting that, but they're not actually going in and telling you that where there are objections, who the players are in those objections. Now, the New York Times itself, on the front page of its print newspaper this morning, I'll try and pull it up here as well, on the front page of its newspaper gives you a list of 6 people. And it's like, hey, here are 4 Democrats and 2 Republicans from all around the United States who say there's no fraud in the United States elections. Cool. Great, you found 6 people. Oh, yeah, this person served as the county commission's electoral board, and they're a Democrat, so you should believe them. No, that's precisely why I shouldn't believe them. Right?
It's like they did the lead up to the election. They rolled out all these fake Republicans, individuals who turned their political careers into the ability to basically lobby for the Chinese Communist Party. We have a bunch of stories exposing a ton of individuals that the Biden campaign not only accepted endorsements from, but really gloated about receiving. If you look up on the Foreign Agent Registrations Act, database, they are active lobbyists for the Chinese Communist Party, an entity we know prefers a Joe Biden victory. But also, I think there's something else worth noting, just the overlap between get out the vote efforts and the technical systems that they're using to vote. We know how much big tech is rigged against conservatives. Voting systems are technology too, right? There's people creating software behind it. I'm sure there's some overlap at these huge tech companies like none other than Facebook, which, if you remember, we had Phil Klein on yesterday talking about how that Chan Zuckerberg initiative funneled millions of dollars virtually exclusively into Democratic counties, a lot of these swing state counties in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona.
98%.
Exactly.
To Democrat counties.
So I was going through the Biden transition team, and there's at least 2 individuals who are linked to the Chan Zuckerberg initiative that are part of his transition team. So again, obviously they're going to be polling people from Facebook. We know the Biden transition team has Facebook's top lobbyist, along with Twitter's top lobbyist joining the team. But when you start to connect the dots and see how there's just a lot of repeat players, both on the voting side of things and the voting technology side of things, or even the fact that certain counties are just throwing out ballots haphazardly, or that the Chan Zuckerberg initiative is conveniently turning out the vote exclusively in Biden areas. Now you see individuals getting jobs within the Biden administration. It's all too convenient, I think.
Thank you, Natalie Winters. Just before we end this show today, I want to make sure that people know what's going on internationally as well and how this is being reported and viewed abroad. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people around the world get their news from CNN, from here in the United States, but some, I mean really some in Europe are still independent-minded and go out and get their news for themselves. Not Boris Johnson, of course. Boris Johnson gets his news right from CNN, probably right from Joe Biden, quite frankly. And that's why Boris Johnson congratulated and Emmanuel Macron congratulated and other world leaders have congratulated Joe Biden. Meanwhile, the race has not been called. And we are seeing the clock the ticking in Trump's direction as we keep counting more votes. But one of the people who hasn't congratulated Joe Biden is Marine Le Pen. Now, Marine Le Pen is not the president of France. She is, she may as well be the president-elect of France as far as CNN's concerned. But Marine Le Pen is the president of France's National Rally Party, what used to be called the National Front. And she released a statement today that said Marine Le Pen, president of the French National Rally Party, quote, absolutely does not recognize, end quote, the election of Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden. She says, I am among those who will not congratulate the future president of the United States because I don't consider the game to be over until we've gone into overtime. So when there is a president decided, she will congratulate that president. And that's the way this is supposed to work. We'll see you again tomorrow at 3 p.m. here for more National Pulse.